Hi, and welcome to this week's From the Vault episode from the Magdalen House podcast. The Magdalen House is a recovery community for alcoholic women, known affectionately by many as Maggies. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization based in Dallas, Texas. In our From the Vault episodes, we share past podcast releases from our 4-podcast series, Recover Ed, Studying the Steps, Recovered Interviews with Alcoholic Women, and Hope for the Family. Our podcast aim to connect, inspire, and educate alcoholic women, loved ones, and the community to the Magdalen House and the services we offer. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for listening.
Hello, and welcome to the Magdalen House virtual Big Book workshop on sponsorship. My name is Cindy Murphy. I'm a very grateful recovered alcoholic. I had my last very nasty drink of alcohol on January the 18th of 2003, and that is a miracle. Thank you all for being here today. Our meeting today is on sponsorship. It's interesting because the word sponsor is never even used in the Big Book, but that doesn't mean that isn't what we're doing. There is a chapter called Working with Others, and that's where we're going to be. And the first requirement for being a sponsor, it is what step 12 says. It says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message. That's what sponsorship is. We tried to carry this message and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And that establishes what a sponsor is. We are carrying the message. And what is the message that we're carrying? That we've had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Now, when we follow the directions in the Big Book about how to work with others, we don't open with that. It's interesting. Bill, when he first got sober, he opened with having the spiritual awakening, his hot flash experience, and he didn't have any success. And he went back to Dr. Silkworth, and Dr. Silkworth said, the first thing you have to do, Bill, is to let them know what's wrong with them. Theoretically, well, in reality, not theoretically, in reality, we take step 1 when we're still out there, okay? But we don't know what the powerlessness means and get into the book and get the help of a sponsor. Even after I was told those things, I still had some lurking notion that it was just a psychological problem. And it's not. It's a mental and physical problem. And so our first job as a sponsor is to make sure that who we're dealing with is, first of all, an alcoholic. And then to find out if they're willing to go to any lengths to recover from alcoholism. So in the book, we're on page 89, Working with Others. And it says, practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with alcoholics. That is the truth. That is the truth. Intensive work with other alcoholics. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence with others when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. That's an important statement because sometimes, especially after we've been sober a while, we forget just how sick a person is when they first come in. Not just physically sick and not just spacey sick and not just detox sick, but a brain that's not working right? And a brain that's accustomed to doing things like canceling meetings. You know, this is what we've been doing all during our drinking career, is backing out of stuff, canceling this, not showing up for that. And so being willing to go to any lengths is one of the first things that we want to share with the person that we're working with, that we don't cancel. This is our first priority, and that's the only way this is going to work, is this has to become our first priority. And it is the greatest joy in our sobriety. It says life will take on new meaning to watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. And I love this sentence: frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. And that is absolutely the truth. There is no brighter spot in my life than when I'm talking with another alcoholic. And I'm talking about all possible things you could be doing. The brightest spot in my life is when I get to talk with another alcoholic, and particularly when I get to help a newcomer. It goes on to tell you how you can find people. You can talk to doctors, you can talk to people in the ministry, priests, rabbis, whomever. I know that in this time of coronavirus, everybody's going, how do I find newcomers? How do I find newcomers? It is challenging, but we find them at Maggie's. As time goes by, people will contact you and say, I've got an alcoholic son or daughter or friend. Do you know how we can get help for this person? I mean, there will come many, many ways. If your own house is in order, God will provide that. And every morning in our morning meditation, we ask God how we can best serve Him, and how we can find people to work with. There's a book, an interesting book I want to bring up. It's a book by Joe McHugh called Carry This Message. And he talks a lot about how to do it. And that's great supplementary information to what the big book says. Joe McHugh was Clift's sponsor, and Clift at one point was my sponsor before he died. All right. So what we want to do is be as helpful as we can. We don't want to argue with psychiatrists or ministers or anything. We're just there to carry this message and to be helpful. The next few pages talk about families contacting you for help. That's not how I have met most of the people I've worked with. I've met them one-on-one. I haven't met their families first. I've met the alcoholic first. But if you are in a situation where you're called on by a family to be of help, this gives you a really good guidelines for how to talk with the family about it, and how, like, for example, to wait till the person is jittery or nervous before talking with them. I do a lot of night watch for Alcoholics Anonymous, and I get calls from drunk people. And it's a waste of time to try to talk to somebody who's drunk. That's just a waste of time. We want to wait until they have some amount of lucidity before we begin talking to them. If he doesn't want to see you, don't ever force yourself. We're not here to sell anything, to convince them that they wanted to be sober. I can't do that. The only thing that convinces somebody that they want to be sober is to drink enough. They have to have had all the fun they can stand. That is their step one. And I don't want to get in the way of anybody's last drink, because if I get in the way of their last drink, they haven't had it yet. So when you meet somebody, you want to make sure that they understand the disease of alcoholism and that they identify. What you can do, it says on page 91, it says, see your man alone if possible. At first, engage in general conversation. After a while, turn the talk to some phase of drinking. Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself. If he wishes to talk, let him do so. Sometimes that gets onerous, doesn't it? They start talking, but if you will listen, you're going to learn more and more about that person, and how best to approach him. It says you will thus get a better idea of how you ought to proceed. If he is not communicative, give him a sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit. So this is your opportunity to share your war stories. This is your opportunity to really talk about alcoholism and how it affected you. But then it says, but say nothing for the moment of how that was accomplished. If he is in a serious mood, dwell on the troubles and so forth. I'm not going to read this whole chapter to you, I promise. But it's very important, if you're going to sponsor anybody, to be very familiar with this chapter and to follow the directions in it. And then it says, when he sees you know all about the drinking game, commence to describe yourself as an alcoholic. Tell him how baffled you were, how you finally learned that you were sick. This is talking about the mental obsession. Give him an account of the struggles you made to stop. Show him the mental twist that leads to the first drink of a spree. And then it says, if he is alcoholic, he will understand you at once. He will match your mental inconsistencies with some of his own. That's learning that I'm powerless over choice, right? I tried to quit and tried to quit and tried to quit. Every now and again, I'll meet somebody who's never tried to quit before, and I'm always shocked. But all those attempts that we made, all those attempts and all those failures, attempts and failures and attempts and failures, is something that really people need to have gone through to really understand that they're powerless over choice, and not just powerless 24/7 over choice. Many of us are able to stop drinking for some period of time, maybe an hour, maybe a month, maybe a week, but we always go back to it. And that's the crux of the disease, and that's what we want to make sure they understand. We also want to make sure they understand the physical component, the allergy to alcohol, which makes us powerless over control. I have no control once I start drinking, and when I really want to stop, I can't stop. That's what we have to focus on. It says to continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. I've heard people say, oh, you can't tell them that. Yes, you can. The book tells us this, what we have is a fatal disease, an absolutely fatal disease. Talk about the conditions of body and mind which accompany it. Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. And then it says doctors sometimes won't tell alcoholics the whole story, but it says, but you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. I can stress the hopelessness of this condition. I remember going to Homeward Bound once with another girl, and I was really giving them what Cliff used to call a killer case of alcoholism. That was my job, to give them a killer case of alcoholism. If you identify with what alcoholism is, this is it. And the girl I was with was going, oh, don't say that. Don't say that. No, I do. The book tells me to, because I offer a solution. This isn't just some sort of, I don't know, personality quirk. This is serious business. This is life and death. It says, even though your protege may not have entirely admitted his condition, he has become curious to know how you got well. Let him ask you that question if he will. If I have a new person who says, how did you get over it? I got him. That's the person I want, right? Because if they're interested in a solution, so many times I've talked to people about alcoholism and they've never asked, well, what did you do? They're not convinced that they either that they're alcoholic or that they're not that curious to know how I got well. So they're not done. I think I can safely say that. And if he asks you, then on page 93 at the top, it says, tell him exactly what happened to you. Listen to this. Stress the spiritual feature freely. That's when I can stress the spiritual feature freely, is when they ask, how did I get over it? Some people are afraid to talk about the spiritual stuff. Well, step 2 says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And in step 3, they use the word God. So, I mean, what are we being shy about? Remember, the message I'm carrying is that I've had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. So I can stress the spiritual feature freely. I am not going to get into religion. I am not going to bring in any kind of religious concepts or even spiritual concepts that might turn a person off. I'm going to stress that they absolutely can develop a spiritual awakening and a spiritual experience with a higher power that's to their understanding, to the God of their understanding, or the higher power to their understanding. Okay. The main thing is, it says he can choose any conception he likes, provided it makes sense to him. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself, and that he live by spiritual principles. And it tells us, again, not to use everyday language and to leave theology out of it. I sponsored a woman one time out of Maggie's who had been a missionary. And she certainly knew a lot more about religion than I did. But I had to say to her, if whatever it is you've been doing, you still drink, then something's missing, you know? And what's been missing is that faith without works is dead. Having faith is important, but it has to be followed by action. Okay. Then it tells you if you've gotten in that far and everything's copacetic. So now you can outline the program of action and you're going to talk to them about the steps in a general way. And it also says in this book to leave a copy of a big book with them so that they can read it. And the other thing that's important, I think is really important, is to make it plain that he is under no obligation to you, that you hope only that he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulty. And it says, suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. Make it clear that he is not under any pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You should not be offended if he doesn't want to call it off. A lot of women, especially in early sobriety, when we sponsor people and the people we sponsor either go away or fire us or whatever, and we're kind of offended by that at first. I mean, we're kind of got a little bit of hurt feelings and wondered what we did wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. Either a person's ready or they're not. And at the top of page 96, which is where my sponsor used to send me all the time, it says, do not be discouraged if a prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy. So that is just the truth. If you work with 100 women, maybe 10 of them will stay sober, maybe less. You just keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. But who gets sober are the people who absolutely are convinced of their step one and are willing to go to any lengths. So the main thing I want to just encourage everyone is if someone goes away or doesn't get sober or whatever, we are not at fault. If a person is to find God, the desire must come from within. And the desire for me came with when I was convinced that there was no human aid available to me. I had to seek a spiritual experience. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
I do, Cindy.
Yeah.
It's Nancy. I was just wondering if you've come across in your sponsoring over the years someone that absolutely refuses to believe in God, and how you handle that as far as having them conjure up some sort of higher power. Any tips on that?
I have not had anybody refuse. I have had people that I think were lying to me about their belief in a higher power that they didn't really believe. And I just keep moving with them. You know, there was a guy who didn't believe in God and really hated it and wound up getting drunk. They kept working with him and working with him. And then one morning he appeared at Bill's house and he was reading, at that point, this is before the big book was written, he was reading the Sermon on the Mount. So he was willing, he became willing. But for a lot of people, that's a strange thing. I personally don't think that anybody's really an atheist. I think people are really angry at religion. And we all give lip service to this is a spiritual program, not a religious program. But that's a real hard thing for people to separate in their minds, really, especially if they have a lot of old ideas that were not necessarily spiritual, but more dogma. That's something that you just need to talk to your sponsor about. And because there's not a right or wrong answer there, but I don't know how anybody could get sober without a belief in I don't know, energy, something that's greater than them.
Perfect. Thank you, Cindy.
Okay. There's a lot of advice given in this book. It says, page 96, he may be broken homeless. If he is, you might try to help him about getting a job or give him a little financial assistance. But you should not deprive your family or creditors of money they should have. Perhaps you will want to take the man into your home for a few days, but be sure you use discretion. Be certain he will be welcomed by your family, that he's not trying to impose upon you for money, connections, or shelter. Permit that and you only harm him. You will be making it possible for him to be insincere. How many times have I walked down that road of trying to be helpful and help people? I remember one woman that I picked up from Maggie. She needed gas money and I gave her gas money and I felt like that was the right thing to do, but I never heard from her again. Or I've tried to sponsor people who need a little help here and a little help there and whatever, they can't get sober, and that's just not true. It says that we never avoid these responsibilities, but be sure we are doing the right thing if we assume them. Helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. A kindly act once in a while isn't enough. You may have to act the Good Samaritan every day if need be, and it goes on with all the kinds of things that could happen when you're trying to help somebody. But on page 98, it says, it is not the matter of giving that is in question, but when and how to give. This often makes the difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work on a service plane, like trying to help meet all the needs a person has other than the need to get sober, the alcoholic commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. So if we're too giving, we're going to make them dependent on me rather than on God. And that's not good. What we're really here to do, the assistance we're here to provide really and truly, is to help them get connected to the God of their understanding by working these steps and have them rely on God. I'm here. I'll tell you, I had the greatest sponsor experience. I was so blessed. My first sponsor for 10 years, and then she left, but she was my sponsor for 10 years. And she held me accountable to the point that it made me feel like a 3-year-old. The book is saying that we need to be kind and all of these things and no lectures to be endured and that kind of thing. But she held me accountable. You know, there was no backing out of anything. It started a whole new pattern for me where if I'm going to be at a certain place at a certain time, by golly, I'm going to be there. I'm going to go to 3 meetings a week. I'm going to go to 3 places a week to carry this message. And this was during a time when that was a lot easier to do than it is right now. And I talked to her every single day. During coronavirus, I mean, it's been hard even just to get people to call and stay in touch. But this is something we need to hold each other accountable to, because we can drift off into no man's land in no time. Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition is that he trusts in God and clean house. Above that, it had said, and this is so common that we hear among people when we're sponsoring, that some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth. Job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence upon other people ahead of dependence on God. And, you know, so many times somebody will leave treatment and I'll start working with them and they'll say, well, first I have to get a job. I have to get my husband back. I have to get a car. I have to get this. I have to get that. No, you can get sober regardless of any of that. And if you don't get sober, you're going to lose all that anyway. Right? Right as rain, the simile. You're going to lose it all. You're going to lose it all if you don't get sober. So the sobriety has to come first. Okay. And it tells us that we can give advice, but there's there's not a lot of advice I can give that's beyond what's in this book. I found the most effective way to be a sponsor is to stay in the book with the people, to take them through each step. And when they call with 10 steps, rather than to give an opinion or something, get them right immediately back into the book. That's really important, because I can get really, I think the problem, and I hear this from the women I sponsor, and this certainly has been a problem for me. Anytime I get into twisted or off with one of the people I'm sponsoring, it's because I'm not staying in the book. I'm getting into their drama rather than bringing them back to the book. It tells us in this chapter that both you and the new man must walk through this thing together, day in and day out. But when I start giving opinions on things that I'm not qualified to give opinions on, and getting into the drama of things, I'm on the wrong track. I have to stay in the book with the people I sponsor. Any questions about that so far?
I love that. Don't get into the drama, stay in the book, because some people will call and becomes more of a, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a doctor. I think when we sponsor, we're not there for results. We're to take a person through the book, period, and I can get off on the drama sometimes myself. And you're just spinning wheels, It's not our job.
Exactly. I mean, my sponsor, when I would take a bunch of drama to her, the first thing she would say to me was, "Is there a question? Do you have a question?" And I better have a question. I better not just be dumping on her. I'm looking for a solution. And the solution to all of our problems is in this book. All of our problems.
Cindy,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you. I have a question. I
Please.
actually have two questions. So being nearly sober and sponsoring, what do you do, I guess, emotionally for yourself and then also for your sponsee, if they are fully in belief that you're supposed to save them and you're the only one on earth that can, and they refuse to work with anybody else, or back to what Nancy said, or truly trust that God is the one that's going to be helping them and that you're literally just there to teach them what the book says and to put their hand in God's. How do you handle that emotionally for yourself? And then how do you handle that as far as getting the sponsee to understand that that's not your job, is not to save them?
Well, first of all, we go to, are you willing to go to any lengths? And going to any lengths means you cannot place that responsibility on me. And if someone does, there's something screwy. It's just like we read in the beginning. Remember, they are very ill. And when they first get sober, their minds aren't clear. Our minds aren't clear when we first get sober. And if I'm willing to go to any lengths, and my sponsor says, I think someone else should sponsor you, you are too attached to me, and I am not God. And if they go, no, only you can help me, then they aren't willing to go to any lengths. They're using that broken brain, and they're not clear yet on what this is about. Okay. And never let someone you sponsor hold you hostage. That's just wrong. Because it's God getting them sober, and it's not you. In the beginning, it's so tricky because you really want to be, the top Girl Scout sponsor, right? You really want to do your very best and everybody think you're wonderful and that sort of thing. You will get over that. I promise. The more people you sponsor, you get over that. It's not about me. Either you want what I have or you don't. So you can go get another sponsor if you don't want what I have, and that's fine because that frees me up to sponsor somebody else. But if somebody is putting that kind of pressure on you, I frankly would bring my own sponsor into this and have her talk with this girl, because that's not healthy at all.
Thank you. I'll save my next question for later.
Okay. All right. So the book encourages us to get to know the family members. I haven't known that many family members of people I've sponsored, because most of the people I've sponsored haven't had families, or their families don't get involved. But we need to, as best as possible. Most of the people I've sponsored, their husbands don't want to know me, you know, or whatever. But sometimes it comes up and we get to know each other. But it's encouraging us to know the family, so that if this person gets drunk again, they have someone they can talk to. They can talk to me. I can encourage them to go to Al-Anon family groups and family support. And so sometimes that happens and sometimes that doesn't. The book spends some time talking about divorce. A lot of women that I have sponsored are either in the middle of a divorce, about to get a divorce, just got a divorce, just got separated, those kinds of things. Their first priority, and I just went through this with somebody because she was in the middle of a divorce and she could not put sobriety first. She kept putting the fairness and the equity of the divorce first, and couldn't get past that, and she couldn't stay sober. We have to put this first. We have to put this first, or nothing else is going to happen that's any good. And as I grow in the program, I might become able to have a relationship again with the same person. As I stay sober and learn to practice spiritual principles and make my life a demonstration of God's power, lots of times people come back together. Sometimes they don't. It just depends. But when people want to talk to me about their divorce, I try to just stay on spiritual principles. I'm not a divorce lawyer. I'm not a therapist. And as Sandra said, I'm certainly not a psychiatrist or psychologist. And even if I were, that I wouldn't know what to tell somebody. I don't know. Like, I've had people say, should I date this guy? I've never met the guy. You know, I don't know. Have you prayed about it? I have to stay out of that kind of stuff. If what they're doing is against spiritual principles, let's say they're dating a married man and they're married, well, now I have something to say, you know, that's being dishonest and selfish, and you're causing other people harm. You see the difference? Anyway, on and on it says no rule can be laid down, but if we stick with the book and the principles in the book, we can be helpful. Let's see, what else do we have to say about this? Oh, it's important to read this chapter really thoroughly, but also the chapter of Vision for You is a really important chapter. There's a line in there that I like a lot. It's on page 163. And this is for those of you who are new and are just beginning to sponsor. And it says, we know what you're thinking. You're saying to yourself, I'm jittery and alone. I couldn't do that. But you can. You forget that you have just now tapped into a source of power much greater than yourself. To duplicate with such backing, what we have accomplished is only a matter of willingness, patience, and labor. You don't have to be a perfect sponsor. There is no such thing as a perfect sponsor. But the most perfect thing we can do is stay with the instructions in this book, which means you've got to know this book. You don't have to know page numbers. I know lots of people who know exactly what page everything's on. I'm not one of those people, but I know how to find anything I need in this book. So being real familiar with this book, and also when you first start sponsoring, use your own sponsor to help you with it. Because sometimes we don't know, you know. And sometimes we do know, but it's just not coming to us. But the very first thing we do is give them that killer case of alcoholism, see if they're willing to go to any lengths, and then give them accountability for going to any length. This is, surely there's more to say about this than that.
Cindy, I have a question.
Absolutely.
So I'm coming up on 8 months, and I remember for the ladies that are in the house, it's so, the whole sponsor thing, I didn't really understand it. So, when you're for being a sponsee and a sponsor, like what are for the ladies in the house, what are a few things that you look for when you're trying to find somebody and you're brand new in sobriety? Like what would you say to those ladies?
In finding a sponsor,
Yes.
I would want a sponsor who has worked the steps, had a spiritual awakening, and tell you that right off the bat, and that will keep you in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. If I'm just going to discussion meetings and that's all I'm doing, and my sponsor only goes to discussion meetings and we just chat, that's not going to get me sober. I have tried it that way. I've tried it every way I knew, and nothing worked until I followed the directions in this book to the letter. So I would want a sponsor who does that. We don't need a new best friend.
Okay.
Many of us do become friends in sponsorship. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we never even, these days, I'm sponsoring people I've never even met. I'm sponsoring people in other cities and other countries. And we're doing this over Zoom or over the phone or whatever. And you may or may not develop a close relationship with them. But what I want is the kind of spiritual life they have. I want to be sober like they are. I want to be sober and happy about it and not wishing I could drink again. I don't. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing when you get to the point where the mental obsession is totally removed and it's not even appealing? That's the kind of person I want for a sponsor. And I want a sponsor who's happy about their sobriety. If I went to an AA meeting and a person said, I've been sober for 30 years, I lost my husband divorced me, I lost my job, life sucks, I hate this coronavirus, everything's awful, but at least I didn't have to drink today. That's not who I want. I want somebody who finds joy in living.
That's awesome. I think that's really, I love what you said earlier. It's a little intimidating when you're still, the spiritual awakening happens all the time, and it's such a blessing, and you so want to share with people. But it is intimidating sometimes when I fumble through the book because I get so excited or whatever. So I was glad to hear you say that. I know the book, or I feel like I'm still learning, but I cannot quote pages to save my life.
I can't either. And I've got people I sponsor who know what's on every page in this book. And they're always saying, oh, you mean page 64? And I'm going, I don't know. I have to go look at it. Numbers, the language of math. Anyway.
I have a follow-up question to Delia's, if you don't mind. Delia, are you finished? I'm sorry, honey.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Thanks, Cindy.
What do you say about sponsoring someone that you are in a friendship with and you're really close to? If that person came to you and asked you to sponsor them, what would your suggestion be about that?
Well, you will get many different opinions on that. There's no rule about it. I think it's better that they have the anonymity of someone they're not close to. That's my opinion. I wouldn't want to sponsor my best friend, I'd want someone else to, because they could be more honest with that person than with me. there's something so magical about the anonymity. There were things I would tell this strange woman, and I would tell her all these things, but if like a close friend of mine was sponsoring me, I would never tell her that. That's the magic of the anonymity, that there's nothing I can say that's going to hurt their feelings. There's nothing I can say that's going to make them think less of me, because we're all even. We have all screwed up royally, right? We have all just been to hell and back. And I think there's something very special about the anonymity of a sponsor. Okay.
Cindy, I have a question.
Yes, Molly.
Does it say anywhere in the book that women should sponsor women and men should sponsor men? Or what do you say about that?
It doesn't say that anywhere in the book. It doesn't. I had a woman sponsor, and when she left, Cliff became my sponsor, who was a man. There was no problem with that for me. He was like 80 something years old at the time, and I didn't have any problem with that. But I know that he was nicer to me than he was to the guys he sponsored. He was gentler with me. Okay.
Thank you so much.
I tried to sponsor a man one time who was gay. And I have to tell, and I thought, well, that'll be fine. There won't be any kind of weird tension there. Oh, there was, because I kept looking at his beautiful blue eyes. I mean, I was, even though he wasn't attracted to me, I was attracted to him. And it would made it harder for me to be blunt, you know? My personal opinion is that a best case scenario is that men sponsor men and women sponsor women. We see the world differently. We react to things differently. But by the time Cliff was sponsoring me, I had over 10 years under my belt at that time. So I was just 10th stepping with it, you know, and visiting. Any other questions? Yes, Lane.
I wanted to ask about timing and boundaries. I know my sponsor said I never answered the phone, but I have the text me and then I'll call you back. And that seemed to work well for us because I didn't want to step on her time. And going forward with me being a sponsor, like what's a safe zone so they set up the appropriate boundaries, and also how quickly. I know we went through the steps pretty quick, like almost within a month. I don't know if there's any guidelines somewhere to follow on that, or just I guess it depends on each person, but if you had any advice for any of that.
Well, first of all, I worked the steps in a week. That's the truth. I hadn't made all my amends. I still haven't made all my amends. I've made most of my amends. I've made all the amends that I can make. But as it says in the book, we immediately get into step 10 as we're making amends. But I'd gotten to step 12 within a week. Now, I didn't start sponsoring people then. My sponsor took me by the hand everywhere we went, and she let me talk with people, but not sponsor people yet, until after I had some more amends behind me and more experience 10th stepping and that sort of thing. But the steps themselves I went through pretty quickly. Now, when it comes to boundaries, I don't have any boundaries. If somebody needs to call me, call me. If I can take the call, I'll take the call. If I can't, I'll call you back. I have a couple of people I sponsor who just call me from time to time. Most of the people I sponsor are people who have a lot of sobriety. I have a few relatively new ones, and I take their calls immediately. But most of the people I sponsor, many of them will text me first and ask when would be a good time. If it's an emergency, SOS, I tell people call me immediately. And if I don't pick up, leave a message, emergency, need to talk immediately, and I will call them immediately unless I'm sound asleep. But I don't know about, I don't like the word boundary, no offense, but I let God set my boundaries.
Thank you. Yeah, I've just struggled with that in the past, not having them. So that's why I wanted to just ask. Thank you.
Me too, still do. But I ask God to guide me all throughout the day. And I don't set the boundary. We consider our plans for the day. And then we let God carry us through step by step throughout the day. You know, we get inconvenient phone calls. There's no doubt about it. But you know what? Those are the most important ones to take.
Cindy, can I ask one more question?
Please, because I've given you all I know.
I doubt that, but thank you. So a conversation I've recently had with my sponsor was, when can I start saying no? What is a good rule of thumb that you pass on to your newly sober sponsees on how many people they can sponsor and actively take through the steps?
I was just reading in Joe McHugh's book about that very thing. And he said that it's important not to sponsor too many people at one time, because you need to be able to give yourself to that person. Like, I don't think I would want to sponsor more than 3 newcomers at a time, but I have a lot of time. I have a lot of time to devote to that. But what Joe McHugh was saying, and this is what my sponsor did too, she would pass people who asked her to sponsor them onto me. Give you a good little story. I'd been sober a few months and I wasn't sponsoring yet. And a woman came to our group who had been sober like 29 years. And I've just been sober a few months. And dare I pass this woman on to me, because she'd never worked the steps. And so I took a woman with 29 years of sobriety through the steps, and it felt weird as all get out. But it worked. It went great.
Are you the loved one of an alcoholic? Our family support group serves as a community for friends, loved ones, and family members of alcoholics to learn about alcoholism, understand how to help an alcoholic, and experience an improved quality of life, regardless of the alcoholic's recovery. We have weekly support meetings that meet virtually and in person, as well as a monthly speaker meeting. To find out more about our family support group, visit magdalenhouse.org/family.
Cindy, may I say something?
Yes.
You know, it's all about God and his direction. You know, when someone asks you to sponsor them, I feel they felt a God incidence with you, a connection. I mean, I agree with 3 newcomers at a time. That's a lot, but you know, it's a calling, really, you know, and God is directing it, you know. So I think too, to pray about it, number one, before you say, yeah, you know, especially if you're pretty darn busy. But it's a God incidence when someone asks you to sponsor them. You know, it's let him direct you, is my feeling. Thanks.
I couldn't agree more. But I do think it's good if especially if you've been sober a while and you've got a whole bunch of people coming in, and maybe people that didn't pick you but just saw your name or whatever. If you've got other women you're sponsoring, like I have some women I'm sponsoring that don't have many or anybody to sponsor at the moment, to give them an opportunity to sponsor. I'm not trying to get out of sponsoring. I'm trying to pass it on for other people to have the experience, because somebody may have met me and not met, you know, somebody else, you know. But I never say no, I don't think. The only time I've ever said no to somebody is when they refuse to do anything that I ask them to do out of the book. And then and what my response always is, I will always be here until I die. And you can call me anytime you're willing to go to any lengths. And if they're willing to go to any lengths, let's get on it.
On that note, Cindy, when, you know, it is hard. I mean, my sponsor tells me all the time, it's hard to say no sometimes, or, you know, get back on track. And so when you say to a sponsee, you know, call me when you want to work the steps or when you're ready, And then they do, but the conversation, there's excuses and there's, it never goes forward. How do you say in a loving way, or do you just say, you're not ready?
Well, that depends. How the words you use depend on how you feel guided at the moment. It's not just them. There are a lot of women that you will start to sponsor that you think really do have step one down, but they only have it in their head. They haven't had the experience. They understand what alcoholism is, but they're not really there. And those are the women who aren't willing to do what you ask them to do. And how I would phrase it to them depends on the person. But sometimes I'll say, gosh, it sounds like you're really busy. When you're really willing to put your full focus on this, call me. Now, not me, but everybody else in this world is real busy right now. I think, I don't know. Everybody's busy. But when I got sober, I was teaching school and I had 3 kids at home and a husband and a house to maintain and all kinds of stuff going on. And I did every single thing my sponsor told me to do. And that's not because I'm a superhero. That's because I had that level of desperation. And if you don't have that level of desperation, the desperation of a drowning man, I mean, it's so painful to see somebody and full well they're a full-blown alcoholic. You know it to the tips of your toes. And they're a little reluctant to do anything, or they have excuses or whatever. It's painful to watch. It's a painful thing to say. But all I know is from my experience, once I got that I was a hopeless, helpless alcoholic, I was willing to do anything I was told to do, even things I did not agree with. What my sponsor said to me is, are you ready to get serious this time? I said, yes. She said, can you follow directions? I said, yes. And she said, we'll see. And the first time you balk, you're out of here because I don't want to watch you die. Doesn't that sound mean and harsh? It's the truth. And it's exactly what I needed to hear. I'm not going to watch you die. Move on.
Miss Cindy,
Yes.
my iPad was about to die, so I had to run really quick and get my charger. Could you repeat that for me? That sounded very, very important.
Okay. When I got sober this last time, my sponsor said to me, are you really willing to get serious this time? Because remember, I was a chronic relapser forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. She said, are you willing to get serious? And then her second question was, are you willing to go to any lengths and can you follow directions? And I said, yes. And her response was, we'll see. But the minute you balk, you're out of here. You're out of here because I don't want to watch you die. Because I was a bad, bad drunk and you couldn't tell me anything. I thought I was just sweet, precious, and darling, but I had no humility whatsoever. I thought I might be a bad drunk, but by golly, I'm smart. I'm smart. And you can't tell me stuff that I don't already know. But this time, I gave up all my thinking, gave it all up, and just followed directions. And when I did that, I got sober.
Hey, Cindy.
Yeah.
Can I just make a comment on the question? Because I just had this experience with my last sponsor. We played the 1, 2, 3. No, not we. I played the 1, 2, 3 dance with her for about 1.5 years. And what she told me in a very loving way was, she said, Molly, maybe you need to start praying and seeing if God wants you to work with somebody else, because obviously I'm not getting the message across to you the way you need to hear it. And at first I was like, oh no, but you know me, you know when I lie, I was scared. But for whatever reason, I did what she said. And what happened was miraculous. And I have a different sponsor now. And when I called to tell her that, it was beautiful. I felt she was very happy for me because it's a totally different experience. And so the way she handled it was really, really neat because like I said, I just wasn't listening and wasn't willing to go to any lengths. But for some reason, I was willing to do that, and the way that she presented it was really in a loving and kind way. And I still love her to this day. And she did say this, like you said, she said, I will always be here, if you ever, I'll always be here, and so anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. That was a very loving way for her to do that. And you needed that. You needed that to be said to you the way it was said to you. I needed somebody to say, shut up and listen and follow directions. That's what I needed. But that's what's so cool about this is if we're following God's guidance, there's no set rule for exactly what we say. But if we are in conscious contact with God, we will say exactly what that person needs to hear.
I just want to kind of piggyback on what Molly was saying. I think it's important to realize too, when, at some point I had to get a new sponsor and I was like, oh, I'm going to talk to Sandra. And, there was people that, Cindy, and the person I wanted to be my sponsor couldn't sponsor me. And I thought it was like the end of the world. And until she said to me, you can have your circle of trust. You can have women around you that are working a program that almost like mini sponsors in a way that, to stay close. She said this to me. She said, use me and utilize me. I'll always be there for you. I know that I could call Sandra in a heartbeat, or Lynn, or you, Cindy, and we still have each other's back. But I guess my point is, if a sponsor doesn't work or you've got to move on to somebody else, it can be really scary, and don't let it be, because if people around you are working a good program, you still have your little circle of people. Anyway, that's all I gotta say.
That's an excellent point. It's not like breaking up with a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Okay.
But it felt like that at first because I was so new.
But it's not. It's really not. All of us are just agents of God. We're just agents. We aren't God. We're not breaking up with God. And one thing I've found is that I've had a number of different sponsors over the years, and some people are there just for a season. That's who you need then. And then for whatever reason, you get moved over here or moved over there. But I think it's really important that you have at least one person who knows your whole story. And that person is your sponsor, who knows your whole story. Because I can call anybody and they can give me great advice if they're giving it to me from the book. For sure, they can point me in the right direction. But lots of times they don't know the full story of what's driving me to behave that way. What's driving me to have this character defect of fear or whatever. And the solution is the same. But if there's somebody who really knows you, really, really, really knows you, that can be the most effective.
Cindy, I have another question.
Yes.
Shocker. Sorry.
Here.
To piggyback off of Delia's question. So when I was in the house several times and having to ask a lady to sponsor me, it's kind of like asking someone to go to prom with you. And it's like really nerve-wracking, right? It's like, hey, will you help save my life and put my hand in God's? But anyway, what advice would you give to a woman who's struggling with the courage to ask another woman to sponsor her?
It's another surrender. It's just another surrender. First, I surrendered to the fact that I'm powerless over alcohol. Now I'm going to surrender to someone else. I'm going to surrender to another human being and trust their guidance. The only thing that keeps us from asking somebody to sponsor us is pride and ego. And we're afraid to ask that person. First of all, we're afraid. I've had people say no to me. I was desperately trying to find a sponsor because my sponsors were dying and going away, different things like that. And I had people turn me down. And it is scary. It is scary. But I absolutely have total faith in God that he's going to put me with the right person. And, you know, maybe these people she's wanted to ask weren't the right people. I don't know. But it's another level of surrender to ask another woman, because we don't want another woman telling us what to do. I mean, just by nature. So it's a surrender, and it's like saying, finally, for the first time, I realized my mind is not quite right. I can remember my sponsor, and she was tough. She was really tough on me. And I want to say again, she saved my life because she was tough. I needed tough because I was such a silly person. But she said, Cindy, you could ask anybody on the street what you should do about a certain situation, and they'd have a better idea than you. And that really hit with me. It was like, you're right, you know?
Cindy, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I kind of got the opposite, and I'm sorry, I had to leave a couple of times, so I hope you didn't cover this, but I have the situation has arisen where I have somebody that is balking on step 3 and she's very, very into her religion. Like she's willing to spend like an hour and a half every morning with her religion. And so therefore, when it came to step 3, she's like making excuses. One of them is that I already have a relationship, right, with my higher power. Now, I went over the moral and philosophical convictions galore. And she's like, well, when I was drinking, I wasn't doing this. And now I'm sober and I'm doing it. So I don't know, maybe she's just difficult to work with. And I don't like, I love her so much, and I don't want to tell her that her religion is not correct, right? So I don't know.
Tell you what, I asked somebody one time, how do you know when you've taken step 3? And they said to me, when you're working on step 4. So no matter what words she uses, is she going through with the rest of the work? Because step 3 is making a decision really to go on with the rest of the work.
Okay.
And if she's doing step 4, fine. If what I have worked with people like this before who want to do it through their church. Okay. And that usually doesn't work out that well. Not because the church is wrong, but it doesn't have the program of action. And you're not asking her to leave her church behind. And maybe she has made a decision to turn her will and life over to the care of God. But if you will look in your book, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this, wish I knew page numbers. It's in how it works. Oh, here we go. Though our decision, this is on page 64, though our decision in step 3 was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect, turning your will and life over to the care of God. You're only making a decision, right? It could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. So that's why I think it was Molly who referred to the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So many of us think it's step 3, we're all now having breakfast with God every morning. No. Step 3 is just a decision. And I wouldn't begin to know how to get in a discussion like this with someone who's afraid that this is against their religion. Is that the issue? Like that she's not being true to her religion?
No, I don't think so. I think that maybe she's just under the impression that, I don't know. I don't even know that she's like already found a solution almost, but in her religion. And even when we discussed step 4, she's like, I'm not willing to do that until I get moved, completely moved. And it's just there, it's just constant. Like I feel like I'm almost working her program more better, or more
And that's-
seriously than.
And that's a terrible mistake. If I'm working harder at it than you are, we're on the wrong page.
Would you
Lenny?
suggest asking her to maybe find somebody else then, or?
I'd say, why do you need me? I mean,
Okay.
that's what I would say. That may not be the
Lenny,
right say.
It sounds like she's running the show.
Yeah, in the name of God.
I don't want to run the show no more.
Thank you, Cindy. I gotta go. Love you.
Bye, I love you.
Cindy, I have one more.
Cindy, can I say one thing?
Absolutely.
Okay, hi y'all, it's Lauren McElroy. The best thing I've ever heard Cindy say, she wasn't even sponsoring me at the time, but it was at a meeting, is she said sponsorship should be easy. And if it's not, there's something wrong. And so I'll just let that sink in with you, and Cindy, you can expand on that if you'd like, but it's stuck out to me and never left me for years. So just wanted to say that, if that helps you all, because and now my experience backs up her point. I was so new when she said that, but now the experience is, and I can't even really explain why or how, but it just is. Sponsorship is easy when they're willing to go to any length. So
Yeah, it really is easy when they're willing to do that, when they aren't trying to treat you like their therapist or whatever, when they really are just focused on, what do I need to do to stay sober? Because that's really all we're here to do, is to help people stay sober by working these steps and practicing these principles in all of our affairs. And that's the message. I'll tell you one thing. There are times, and I'm sure if any of you guys have done sponsoring, it's happened to you. I will get resentful at somebody I sponsor. And you know why I do? Because I'm not telling them the truth. Every time it's because I'm not telling them the truth. And the reason I'm not telling them the truth is I'm afraid they won't like me if I say that. I mean, this really is not for slippery people. This is for people who are strong in our convictions and know that we're here just as channels of God's peace. We're not here to argue. I'm not going to argue with anybody I sponsor. I'll say, try it your way. If it doesn't work, call me back. Do what you feel like you need to do. And that would apply also to what Lynn's statement was, Lynn's question. Do whatever it is, because I know as an alcoholic, I'm going to do what I want to do. Okay? What I better want to do is everything that it takes to keep me sober. But I'm not going to do it just because you told me to. So as a sponsor, we don't have to take on that responsibility. But as a sponsor, we need to tell the truth. We need to always tell the truth. And we can do it as lovingly as possible. And sometimes they don't hear that. And sometimes you just have to say, okay, here's the deal. Do this or do it your way. But just like my sponsor, I mean, she was not interested in any of my ideas. Not at all. And that might sound mean, but I'm telling you, it saved my life. Because it took me a long time to cross that bridge of reason to the desired shore of faith. But once I did, that's it. Okay, it's 2:25.
Can I ask one more quick question? Sorry. Okay, Lauren, I'm so glad you said that, because that's amazing. And then you talked about resentment. So my question was going to be, we're human, right? And as much as we love our sponsors, sometimes we're going to get a resentment at our sponsor. What do you tell your sponsees to do in that situation when they have a resentment towards you? Even, I know that part of it would be, sorry, hang on. I know part of it would be to pray and to talk to you about it, but what would you do? What would you say to them if they couldn't talk to you about it if they really needed to 10-step with somebody other than you, about you?
Well, I haven't had that happen to where I could address it too often. But when I do a 5th step with somebody, with a new person, I ask them to put me on their resentment list from the very beginning, so they know it's safe to tell me. You see, because they're bound to have some resentment toward me, because we resent everything when we first get here. Everything hurts our feelings. I've had occasions where people have called me and say, I have a resentment toward my sponsor, and and confide in me, and I make sure that they see what their part is in it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with going to another trusted person, but if you're going to that trusted person just to bash your sponsor, that's the wrong track.
Cindy, hey, it's Nancy. Just really quick along those lines. It was a question that I was going to ask too, and it's about getting broken up with as a sponsor, right? And it's happened to me, and it broke my heart at the time because I was really just latching on to this particular person that I was sponsoring. But after a lot of consultation with my sponsor and living through, having that happen a few times, realize that that's about my ego more than anything else, right? It's all wrapped up in ego, and that's always been a huge problem for me, my ego anyway. But I don't know. I just wanted to add that in at the end. If that kind of thing is happening and you're afraid to go to your sponsor, or you got to break up with your sponsor or whatever, and then as a sponsor having that happen to you, it's all about, for me, it's about my ego.
Absolutely. That's true for all of us. It's true for all of us. And the good news is, as time passes and you get more and more experience in this, you don't take it personally. I don't. If someone says, I want a different sponsor, that's fine. I just want them to be sober. I just want you to have your best shot at getting sober.
Exactly. And what I say now is just, that's great. And now we can be sober friends. And I mean it. And I really mean it, so anyway.
And one last thing. I used to go carry the message a lot with this girl who I didn't think did a very good job carrying the message. I thought that she was boring. Secretly. And at the end of, and this was at the Salvation Army, and at the end of the meeting, everybody rushed to her to ask her to be their sponsor, and not one person came to me, not one. And it was a great lesson for me in learning that we need all kinds of people to be carrying this message. We need all kinds of people to be willing to sponsor, because sometimes you can hear what I say, or you cannot at all hear what I say, and I don't know why that is, but sometimes you just are able to hear it from a person out of the blue. As Lauren pointed out, sponsorship needs to be easy. It doesn't need to be hard. And if you've got somebody who's really willing to go to any lengths, it will be easy. This guy in our group used to say a sponsor could be a monkey with flashcards. You're just following the directions in the book. Just do this. And if they don't want to do it, okay, that's their choice. But I'm not going to argue. I am not going to argue with anybody I sponsor, ever. I just go, well, you might be right. Try it your way. All right, it is 2:30, so I guess it's time to close the meeting out. And we'll go to page 164. I do know that page number. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come. Let's read that one more time. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. That's the key, to ask God what you can do to help these people. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously, you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship is right with him. And great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you charge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. Big Book, page 164. It has been such an honor to be with each and every one of you today.
This has been a re-release from the Magdalen House podcast for our From the Vault series. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Tune in every Wednesday for a new release from one of our 4 series. To learn more about the Magdalen House and the services we offer, visit magdalenhouse.org or follow us on your favorite social media channels.